Academy webinar, an initiative coordinated by the Paperless Lab Academy. We have a really great forum today. So as always, there are many participants from Europe and also from the rest of the world. So very interesting. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Academy webinar. I will be your moderator today. My name is Isabel Munoz-Villari, co-owner and managing director at NL42 Consulting, organizer of the Paperless Lab Academy. The webinar system is muting you for the whole session. Anyhow, you can interact at any time, placing your comments and questions in the Q&A section on your left. A few words about the Paperless Lab Academy, the PLA. The PLA started 10 years ago as a 2-day European Congress and has built a strong reputation over the years. More than 30 solution and service providers sponsor it every year. The Paperless Lab Academy is now going global, and we will be hosting 3 editions in 2023. The 10th anniversary of the European edition at the Lake Maggiore in Italy, in which you are all invited. The 4th edition in India, in Hyderabad, and the very first in the USA, in Raleigh, North Carolina. Today, the Paperless Lab Academy is more than just a congress and provides a platform to discuss the latest in laboratory informatics and scientific data management, as well as other related topics. So we host additional activities throughout the year, like this webinar today, in collaboration with Benchling. You can always find more information at paperlesslabacademy.com. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you today to our speaker, Marie-Cécile Pinel. Marie-Cécile is Team Leader Professional Services at Benchling. She is helping to streamline scientific processes in silico, hence expediting the path from bench to market. In this webinar, Marie-Cécile will explain us how Bit.bio is elevating its discovery, research, and development teams by creating more efficient, collaborative, and happier teams through digital transformation. Thank you very much for your attention and for attending this Academy webinar. Marie-Cécile, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Let's get started. So, welcome everyone. As Isabel said, my name is Marie-Cécile Pinel, and I'm a leader for professional services at Benchling. Before getting any started, I would like to thank the team of the Paperless Lab Academy for hosting this webinar. The organization has been impeccable, and they are a true pleasure to work with. Second, I would like to thank all the participants for making this event possible. We hope that this will be an enjoyable session full of learning. What brings us here today? Recently, we had the honor to interview a very special guest, Furkan Iqbal, Senior Director for Information Systems at Bit.bio. During our chat, Furkan shared stories and thoughts about building a digital infrastructure for a modern R&D team. Some spoilers, good news even. Most interests and issues are common across the R&D industry. Even better news, Benchling helps to address them in a holistic and centralized manner. Before focusing into Furkan's insight about digital transformation, we would like to start by a short introduction aimed to explain what we do, how we do it, and why it matters. Benchling's mission is to support customers getting science outputs to market faster. We work with more than 1,000 of the world's most innovative biotech companies, from small startups to global leaders across different disciplines, such as biopharma, agriculture, or material sciences. Our observation is that the R&D landscape is changing, and this should not come as a surprise, otherwise it couldn't be R&D, right? But in a more serious note, R&D is not only fed with brilliant ideas. Organizations require technology to accelerate innovation. Currently, we have identified that R&D organizations are facing a 3-axis dilemma: data, collaboration, and analytics. Data explosion, there is an exponential increase in data complexity. Managing this data becomes challenging as scientific data lives in silos scattered across multiple disconnected systems in an unstructured way. Second, R&D is becoming more specialized and distributed. Collaboration across the R&D vertical is a must to get a product out of the door. This collaboration happens at internal and at external levels. To date, legacy systems and manual processes are not designed to support complex collaboration, which imposes slow motion and operational inefficiencies. And last, data analytics and automation are critical to stay competitive. Generating data is meaningless if not followed by the right analysis. Concomitant to the increase in data generation, R&D organizations need to extract valuable insight and drive informed decision-making and mitigate operational redundancies. However, many manual and redundant tasks still remain. R&D needs a modern software built for modern science, and that's why we started Benchling. Our main focus is our end user, the scientist. We are building software, a services model, and a community that are truly differentiated. Our software is purpose-built for scientists by scientists. We have an experienced team of engineers whose priority is building cloud-native software that's easy to use and that is easy to adopt. Our engineers work alongside a team of product managers with PhDs and master degrees who understand your challenges and are designing products to make your life and your work easier. Together, these teams are continuously innovating in partnership with our customers, rolling out new features and capabilities 4 times per year. In addition to continuous product innovation, our services approach means that you will be partnering with professional services and customer success leaders, which are devoted to ensure that your implementation and post-sale customer experience will deliver immediate and long-term value. Finally, our foundation is built on a vibrant community of 200,000 plus scientific pioneers, others like you, who are passionate about accelerating modern science and learning and sharing and growing together to unlock the full potential of biotech. Here is what we do. We want to position Benchling as a central source of truth. Benchling R&D Cloud supports and accelerates the R&D life cycle with 4 software layers: data, collaboration, analytics, and open platform. We help our customers to centralize, standardize, and govern R&D data at scale. We enable R&D teams to collaborate in a unified application suite that permits centralizing their work at Benchling. High-quality analytics only become a reality when supported by high-quality data collection. Data in Benchling helps scientists to question and answer via a comprehensive and intuitive reporting system. All these layers are built upon an open platform that permits to scale, maximize security, and drive compliance. Connecting data, teams, and processes across the full R&D lifecycle yields critical outcomes. Just to name a few: accelerated time to market. Our R&D cloud accelerates discovery and innovation, moving products from research and development to market faster. One example of increased scientific productivity is one of our customers that managed to accelerate the cycle time of an antibody discovery workflow by 38%, making it possible to get antibody treatments to patients faster. We help to improve data quality. With Benchling scientifically aware data model, R&D teams can improve their data quality, which in turn accelerates scientific discovery. Our customers improve sample and experimental data traceability by 75% and increase data visualization across experiments and teams by 150%. We also help and support increased throughput. Digitalizing data capture, workflows, and hands-off permits to run more experiments and programs faster. For example, one of our customers has recorded shortened cycle time for scientific workflows up to 25%. And last, we help boosting faster adoption of technologies. We help organizations to adopt and disseminate new scientific technologies faster and efficiently. As an example, we've recently expanded our R&D cloud to support RNA, a timely addition given the advent of successful mRNA vaccines. To wrap up, let's share those numbers that truly make a difference. Benchling R&D Cloud is used by over 1,000 biotechnology leaders and innovators who are transforming industries across biopharma, industrials, and agriculture. Currently, we have over 100 customers in Europe, such as Bit.bio, our special guest today. More than 20 of the largest biopharma companies rely on Benchling to digitalize their R&D operations. 1 out of 4 biotech startups that went public in the last 2 years were built on Benchling. And last, and importantly, Benchling is also the place where the next generation of scientists go to work. Over 200,000 scientists use our R&D cloud to pioneer cutting-edge research. More than 7,000 academic and research institutions use Benchling nowadays. Because we are and we work with scientists and researchers, we are constantly testing and pushing the boundaries of what can be done to improve and advance biotech R&D. Wherever you are on your journey, we can help, and we are bringing together the best talent in tech and in science to make this possible. But there's no better message than the one delivered by a user. So this is what we are going to transition right now. After this initial introduction to what Benchling is as a concept and as a platform and how this can help you to digitalize your operations, we will transition towards the chat that we've recorded with Furkan. We are going to approach this in a Zoom-in fashion. First, we will go through an introduction. So Furkan will explain his role, his biography, what is the exact context within Bit.bio. And then we will go first through the challenges that they were encountering in order to set up this digital infrastructure, followed by the solutions that were put in place in order to make this journey successful. And last, we are going to socialize some lessons learned that can be definitely leveraged by you and your teams, hopefully in the near future. So I'm going to share now the very first recording with Furkan, that it's going to be an introduction about himself, the company, and his role at Bit.bio.
My name is Furkan Iqbal. I am a Senior Director of Information Systems here at Bit.bio. I joined the company January last year, so that would be 2021, and it's been quite the ride. I am not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but I love information technology, information systems. And I've worked in a variety of different functions and different industries, originating back from management consultancy, which is where I kind of cut my teeth, and then went contracting across many different industries, which includes banking, central government, retail. I've had some time at Microsoft myself, but yeah, it all seems like it was set up for this stage. So I kind of found my home at Bit.bio, and it's been quite the ride. So a little bit about Bit.bio. Bit.bio, as you guys will have seen, is a stem cell re-engineering company. Bit.bio is essentially developing foundational technology to provide human cells at scale with unmatched precision and consistency. So this is going to be cells for research, for drug discovery and therapy. And this technology that we've got essentially underpins our mission, which is, coding cells for novel cures. By providing unlimited human cells, we can create those novel cures through research, such as increasing reproducibility by democratizing access to consistent human cell models. Drug discovery is another area where we're looking to increase our translational success with human cells for HTS, and cell therapies, removing the major bottlenecks for cell therapies, ensuring that we've got access to a reliable and consistent supply of cells that are highly defined and precisely match the needs of the patient and the disease. So what kind of pulled me through to Bit.bio? Funny story is, when I applied for the role, I didn't realize it was Bit.bio. I was just told it was going to be cutting edge technology, and they needed someone who had experienced quite a bit through information technology, and it was a match. And then later found out that, well, you know, what a great company it would be.
Now we are gonna move towards getting more insight about the challenges itself, about a digital transformation. So we are gonna frame this asking Furkan about how himself being instrumental, driving the company to establish modern systems of processes, starting by identifying challenges and struggles, how, when it was the time that they realized that they needed to do a change, and most importantly, once they've realized that that change was required, how did they go as a company, as Furkan as an individual, advocating for that change?
So when I joined the company, I didn't actually come in as a senior director. I came in as a process and IT manager. And it was the process vein, really, because as a process manager, we really get to know the ins and outs of the company. So we set about understanding what the as-is processes are, where we want to move to. Something called a target operating model is normally pulled together, which is our future state. And it was through the process management work that I basically jumped into head first. I realized that sample management was an area that everyone was talking about, you know, and at that time, you know, we already had Benchling. We had the 2 modules of Benchling. We had the notebook and we had molecular biology, and it was being extensively used, but we didn't have that traceability, that end-to-end 2B process that we really wanted. You know, from inception of an idea through to planning of an experiment, the execution of an experiment, and the capture of the data. So that was our future state in terms of what we wanted to achieve in the short term. And I realized that we needed to make a change. So we pulled together, you know, a series of requirements to understand a little bit more, to kind of, you know, really pad out the process map that I had around what it is that the business really absolutely 100% needs. Once that was done, we went out to, you know, through a mini procurement exercise, and that involved Benchling being one of the vendors. At that point, we didn't know whether we were going to go with Benchling, but it was only through that process did we start to then really understand how Benchling was really different from the other vendors that we were looking at. And the decision became quite easy, you know, as we started to progress. So, you know, it was, yeah, just to kind of circle back around, it was the process background that basically gave rise to, you know, having that holistic view across the business to understand what changes need to be made. And more importantly, you know, bringing the procurement of software into a centralized function, which previously with most startups, you know, you're very keen to kind of get off the ground. So everyone's trying to do their bit, and you can sometimes end up with a duplication of effort. So that's probably yeah, the best way of going around it.
After hearing about the challenges that were initially identified. Now we are gonna go towards the solution, not only how the Benchling team supported their implementation, but also how they were targeting measuring success to make sure that not only that the original idea was making sense, but also that this idea was crystallizing in the long term. So first, we are gonna ask Furkan how the people at Benchling became a differentiator to help Bit.bio bridge the language barrier that generally exists between science and IT with the target of impacting the employee experience.
This was one of the areas where Benchling really did set themselves apart from the other vendors that we've been speaking to. And on my team, I've got data analysts, data engineers, software engineers, business analysts, change managers. And what I knew, the principle that I wanted to kind of bring in was this whole notion of having a conduit between the business and the software. And in this particular case, it was kind of ingrained. I didn't realize it at the time, but it became apparent the more that we spoke with Benchling resources that blend of science knowledge and software deployment or software development knowledge was key. So it wasn't a case of, we'll push this software onto you and then, use it as you wish. It was going to be tailor-made for us. So it was going to really be within our hearts and minds. And that was a principle that I really wanted to instill here at Bit.bio about, software being an enabler, but only being as good as the hearts and minds that are won over by it. Otherwise, you can tick a box and say it's been deployed, but it won't last very long if people haven't really adopted it. And all the way through the process, I remember the pre-sales Benchling resources. Johan was one of the people I recall. Basim, of course. There were, nothing was too big, or nothing was too small. Everything was catered for. All the questions that we had, they went round, their respective teams and came back to us with options. And the other great thing, because I've worked in pre-sales and post-sales before in different organizations, especially when it comes to securing software deals, is that sometimes the post-sales consultants fall out with the pre-sales consultants because pre-sales have promised heaven and earth. And then when it comes to post-sales, it's a case of, well, we can't actually deliver that. That wasn't the case here. So whatever Johan had promised, we got that and then some, through Mike. There were a couple actually, Michael Ford, Mike Shearer. And it was brilliant. It was, that right blend where chords were struck with the science community, within my team as well, and the whole kind of change management function. So when the project management piece came in through Jonathan Pickles, who was our engagement manager, he spoke my language, which was great. Mike spoke my language, but he also spoke the language of the scientists in R&D. And, once it was in flight, as a PM, or the role that I was playing at the time, I could make adjustments. And, it was acceptable. It wasn't a case of, oh, we're going to have to rethink things. It was kind of taken in step. And, we delivered, dare I say, on time, on budget. That's a phrase that's often, overused, but not really meant. But in this particular case, the time frame that I wanted it to be in was exactly the time frame that it landed. So that was great.
And now, of course, and as I referred before, we want to hear more about how those success measures that were set to be achieved were actually being met, and how was the value realized until the point that we've discussed with Furkan.
So the biggest metric that we had, if I had to boil it back to a problem statement, it was essentially, we need to have that foundation, that traceability for any kind of sample that's generated, any kind of banking of that sample, any derivative of that sample, had to be traced. But not just the sample itself, it was the people as well. So individuals involved in different parts of the supply chain, all the way through into the actual conducting of the experiment, into manufacturing. All of those people had to be held accountable too. So from a metric perspective, the key element for me was traceability. And all of our kind of metrics, I won't bore you with what those metrics were, but they all kind of stemmed from the fact that we had to make sure that we had traceability from start to finish. And it wasn't just a case of, those metrics kind of living once and only for the purpose of the project. The insights dashboard within Benchling kind of lives and breathes the metrics that gave birth to the project to begin with. So the benefits realization for the project is actually living and breathing in the form of these dashboards, which continues to evolve, because now that the company and my colleagues are starting to see the benefit of Benchling, it's starting to progress, and there's more requests coming in for additional metrics, around who's using certain notebooks, how many new registries are being created, what's inventory looking like, and how is it actually expanding, contracting. And there's different areas I wouldn't really think about before, which are also starting to come out, and it's great. It's they really are, as I say, living and breathing the change.
And last, gearing towards lessons learned, potential advice that can help you to build your own path moving forward. We've put Furkan a bit on the spot, asking what is he most proud of when thinking about the change that has been delivered throughout this journey.
There's a couple that spring to mind. What am I proudest about? Proud of coming into an organization that, I've never worked in the industry. However, the principles that I've used and applied and lived by in other industries, lo and behold, is actually applicable here in biotech as well. And it's the whole principle of bringing resources together who are operational in nature. So if they're not doing their operational work and they come in to do a project, their operational work is suffering. So it was coming up with a method of working that wasn't too overbearing for those operational resources, to make sure that we delivered what we set out to deliver, which was bring in this sample management solution and set the foundation for additional activities down the line. I'm excited by those, and they're all, involving Benchling. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done. In terms of other lessons that I definitely would recommend is have a target operating model. If you don't know where you're going, you'll certainly get the wheels in motion and you'll start moving, and there'll be activity, but and your ship's probably moving, but where's it moving to? So from an IS perspective, we kind of take guidance from our executive team, and each of our subsequent areas then responds to the strategy that's given, that's communicated with us. In our particular case, it was a target operating model that was born, that kind of laid out what kind of technology we want to use that will support the strategy for the next 5 to 10 years.
All right. So with this, we've covered not only the introduction towards the Benchling platform and how is our vision and what is our mission, but also we've managed to hear from a pioneer in the digital transformation, some collection of thoughts and views that I hope that will be also useful for your activities in the long term. And with this, I believe, Isabel, that we can open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much, Maritel. This was very interesting. The mix of introduction and the full feedback from the customer is always very much welcome. I think there is a lot of questions already answered back from your customer directly. So while people are placing their questions, I would like to have the opportunity to place mine.
Of course.
So we have listened from your customer, sure, and I like to see always the providers are experts
Of course.
in the matter. Okay, so from your own company and personal experience, what is really driving the adoption to digital by the biotechnology and the pharma R&D laboratories? Which are the type of problems they are coming to you, looking for you to solve?
That's the question, I would say. And in my experience, it can be summarized in a word, which is readiness. Everything seems to be feasible on paper. Everything seems to be fantastic when you get a demo. Everyone gets excited when they see the potential of a tool and how their life is going to become better, faster, more productive. But when it comes the time to start hands-on and working through that change, perspective also change, because it requires a lot of thought, it requires a lot of investment. And this doesn't mean that it's complex. It means that it needs to be thought of so that we target the right outcome. And sometimes this level of readiness doesn't exist. It's the projection. We would like to be there, but we don't want to go through that journey. We want this to happen in a blink of an eye. And we know that this is not the case. And also, as long as we get closer to the time that we will transition from the legacy system towards the new system, then there is a moment of panic, because people realize that they will have to start learning something new. And this also requires some mental transition to embrace the change. So this transition, we know that it requires time, it requires care, it requires commitment. Something that we really emphasize is making sure that we are going through this journey with the end users, so they do not feel like we are leaving them alone from the moment the platform is ready. At the end of the day, we can build the most innovative and performing platform ever, but if it's not being used, it's meaningless. So we really need to make sure that whatever we are building has a potential use by the end user. And it doesn't need to be sophisticated. Sometimes companies do not need much. Everyone needs to define the scale at which they want to operate, as long as the users are excited about it, motivated to embrace the change, and ready to go for it. Yeah.
Sure. The challenges of change management or convincing that the future solution is good for them. So how do you encourage this transformation and manage the end user expectations?
There are many fronts in which this can be achieved. It requires a lot of introspection. It's very easy to say, I don't like my system, but why, right? What are the drivers for you not liking something? And doing this exercise, it takes time as well. And once we have framed what are the targets that we would like to get better, we also need to see how the new system will help us to perform differently. Of course, whenever, as I said, we reach this transition phase, it might seem that it takes a long time to adapt the change, because people sometimes have not even done the measure of how long it takes for them to operate nowadays. So for example, how long it takes for you to log an experiment in a comprehensive manner with all the data connected nowadays. They've never measured it, right? So they might have a feeling that it might be a lot or it might be little, but it's hard to quantify. And we understand that quantifying this in a very accurate manner is not a simple exercise, but putting some thought about what are those things that actually take time. Because maybe if you have to go to the third floor to print out something so that you can type it somewhere else, this is minimum 15 minutes going back and forth, that maybe if you learn the new system, it's going to take you 30 milliseconds. And of course, I'm putting the two extremes. But the way in which we need to challenge the view of the users to embrace the new system is, okay, let us know, how do you work right now? What are those points in which your life could be better? And let us help you through this change. And of course, there will be things that operating as the old way, it's easier because it's the one that is known. But let's highlight the benefits. And again, it takes a lot of back and forth, and it takes a lot of negotiation as well. Sometimes it's not going to be everything that we've proposed that it's going to be taken as a solution, and it's not going to be everything that was before the one that remains. The idea here is when we talk about digital transformation, transformation is the key word. We are not going to mimic what we have in a legacy system or even on paper in the exact manner towards a digital platform. If we are trying to do manual versus digital exactly the same, there's no point. Stay like on paper, right? So you really need to challenge yourself and say, okay, I know it's going to take a bit, but let's try to do it. So yeah, we play a lot of this role of encouraging the users that there will be some work to be done, but the benefits will pay off.
Sure. I would like to come back to this conversation, to this topic, but some questions are entering. So there is a nice big one, which is about strategies. Mm-hmm. So which are the strategies to be employed to support this modern transformation? Here the word is a transition. Yeah. Which strategy would you probably recommend?
So first off, we need to do a proper mapping on what is priority for the business and for the science, making sure that business and science align first, because we can also identify situations in which the scientists have a very clear mindset of what they want. The business has a very clear mindset of what they want, and these two do not match. So first off, we need to reconcile them. From the moment there is an alignment about what the company from a scientific and a business standpoint wants to achieve, then we need to understand that priority. Is this getting into the platform fast so that people can start using it and then we will iterate over time? Or rather, we want to implement everything, like all the solution that will be more complex and it will take longer, but from the moment it's there, everything will be ready. So normally we propose the two options, which are start small or relatively small, and then you can build on top. Or let's start with the very holistic mapping of what your solution requires, so that from the moment you are live, your users have everything ready to go. And of course, this is something that we cannot bend towards one solution or another, because it's not our positioning what matters. We are there to help taking the decision, but we cannot take the decision on their behalf. So from a strategic point of view, there is a lot of alignment that needs to happen. And once this prioritization has occurred, then we are happy to say, look, if you want to go fast, that's as fast as we can go. Are you happy with this time frame? And again, it's a negotiation, but then we can reach some sort of compromise. Or if there is if there is a very ambitious plan to be achieved, we can also support that. But keep in mind that this is going to take longer. Are you ready for that? So again, we propose scenarios, but the final strategy needs to be driven by what the business and the scientists want to achieve. And back to Furkan's point, you can start moving things, but if you don't know where you're going, you go nowhere at the end, right? And this can become discouraging in the long term, because people will start putting effort and thought, and they will be committed for this to happen. But if this is going nowhere, lack of focus results in disappointment, right? So it's better to take the time to say, this is what we want to achieve. And from there, let's go.
Correct. So in this sense, rather than going to strategies, see if we move to the tactics, what would be the phases that you would recommend to go through?
So phases are, first off, as any other software implementation, let's understand where the requirements are, right? And once we have discovered those requirements, then we can go in a very basic modular fashion. So we will implement the platform with no tailoring of any kind, or we will start building more complex use cases that depend on what the users need. So one possible scenario, for example, is to phase from the moment we've done requirements gathering and we have a good idea of what needs to be done. This is also going to help us the priorities that need to be set. And we could say, if you have 5 teams in your company, we can do 5 teams at once. We can do 5 teams in a staggered fashion. Then we will go through testing, and then we will go live. This is the first phase, the first global phase that requires the implementation work. But from the moment that we are live, the most important phase is happening, which is adoption and monitoring over time. As I said, it doesn't matter if we build a very sophisticated platform and we all enjoy the design exercise because it's always exciting to play and to say, oh, these are the possibilities. What if we could do it like this or like that? But from the moment it becomes real, that needs to be usable. So adoption phase is key. And we put a lot of care to make sure that we have good adoption rates. We know that at the beginning they will be slow, but then they need to stabilize over time. And once this phase of adoption has become solid, we enter into the phase of long-term monitoring. This basically means that we need to compare the business objectives and scientific objectives that were framed from the very beginning, how we are doing right now. So we need to make sure that we have proper KPIs established to say, okay, this is where we were a year ago. This is where we are right now. And this is eventually what we want to target in a year from now. So this constant monitoring needs to happen. So within this third phase of monitoring, there will be always nano phases happening over time to make sure that this incremental value is being achieved. And sometimes, not only because the platform evolves, but also because the scientific needs evolve, or because there is a new team coming into play, there can be a lot of things to factor in. There is a new work to be done, and that's always exciting, but then we need to factor in, okay, from the moment we add some more work, how is it going to impact the rest? Because at the end of the day, we are trying to establish a centralized backbone for everyone. So we need to absorb newcomers or new functions in a way that is the less disruptive. So just to wrap up in your question, phase 1, implementation, phase 2, adoption, phase 3, long-term monitoring, which is a measure for success.
A good summary. So we have a lot of comments thanking you about the presentation, about the quality and very useful information. We have one more question, more related to the KPIs in the end of about this monitoring. Let me try to rephrase that because it's quite a long sentence. So moving to an R&D cloud system like Benchling, which are in the end the short and long-term wins?
Oh, that's a complex question.
That's why the question was long.
I like to be challenged though. I could reply this in many ways. So for example, I could say an obvious one is speed. Everyone talks about speed. Let's do things faster. But I could also question myself saying, is speed actually what matters, right? So I could propose tracking things faster as the one metric to target for, but maybe that's of anyone's interest. So always to be evaluated. Speed could be one. Efficiency. How do you monitor your efficiency? That's a big one, right? Because are we already monitoring efficiency nowadays? That's a question to pose to the customer, right? How do you monitor that efficiency? And maybe that's no proper way to monitor that. So how do you want to monitor efficiency with us if we are not monitoring efficiency right now, right? Another possibility could be productivity. This is easier to measure, right? Because it's like, we want to have this many projects completed within a year. Assuming that those projects are equally sized, equally distributed, we know that this is not the reality because at the end of the day, projects can be very big, very small, different outcomes can happen. So from a theoretical standpoint, you could say speed, efficiency, productivity as the main target to achieve. For me, it's more relevant to get a more in-depth conversation with the relevant stakeholders asking, what is your real target, right? Do you want to have people spending less time searching for their samples, or do you want to have a centralized system, or do you want to make sure that your inventory is better controlled? We know that in any lab that performs research, not finding a sample or not finding an antibody, sometimes it happens because things do not get properly labeled or they get misplaced and you name it. That's having not only an impact on the time that the employee needs to invest tracing those samples or those regions, but it has a huge financial impact, right? If you don't find a sample, you need to replicate an entire experiment. If you don't find a region, maybe that region is quite costly. So have we ever measured this? To me, this could be a good metric to measure how much we can control our stocks in terms of samples and regions, and making sure that there is no possible loss. That could be an example, if that helps to reply to the question.
Do you have any experiences in internationalization, globalization? So meaning laboratories, R&D laboratories that need really to be in contact one to another and make sure that, for instance, they are not repeating the wheel and make sure that there is complementarity what they are doing and working together, no? There are communication and etc.
Mm-hmm. And this is our day-to-day routine. So we operate with companies, small size, big size. At the end of the day, you have more than one stakeholder. And from the moment you have more than one person in the room, you have two different opinions. So reconciling those opinions is part of the daily exercise. And having a good communication is key. And having not only this communication in a social manner, but in a factual manner. So there will be times in which we need to take a decision that impacts 3 teams that are located in 3 locations that has to do with one way of working. And of course, the 3 teams, they will have their own opinion about how much they like their way of doing, but that's not what we're aiming to achieve. What we're aiming to achieve is that among those 3 options, we need to select one. And this one that will be selected is the one that fits best the 3. Most likely, it's not going to fit 100% to each of the teams that are discussing, but it's going to fit all of them. That's what we are trying to coordinate from the beginning. So one of our main drivers is to make sure that whenever we are having conversations with no matter what size of company, whoever has something to do with the scientific processes, whoever has something to say, even though they might not be working at the bench, they need to be with us so we can help reconciling those views. Something that can be very detrimental in the long term is that we gather a lot of requirements from a subset of individuals that have a lot to say and they are really relevant. But for some reason, we didn't think about incorporating the views from this other person that actually is going to impact the entire solution. And of course, because this is always like this, we will only learn about this person after a year that we are in motion. This is a lot of reward. So something that we need to get full visibility from the beginning is, okay, who are the players in here? Who has a say? And we understand that you might have different opinions. That is okay. This happens in every aspect of life. So let's try to have a nice conversation about it. And probably it's not going to be a one-time show. Probably it's going to take few iterations until we reach a consensus. We prefer to to really focus time on these initial discussions at the beginning so that there is this good understanding rather than having them when we are too much engaged into the building or the developing of the platform. It takes time, but it's worth it.
You were saying before that let's say the first initial basic KPIs are looking for efficiency, productivity, but most of the time, as you correctly said, it's not that the laboratories have a clear understanding where they are with their own numbers. So of course, the fact that you are implementing your solution is, first of all, providing data very quickly and helping them to build those metrics. Mm-hmm. Those are the very basics in the end, no? To have a quick overview of what is their efficiency and productivity immediately. Do you see happening once your systems are implemented and used? Do you see happening other potential interesting metrics?
I would say yes, but it might be very much dependent on each team's interest. And sure. I'm going to refer back to Furkan's point. So there will be departments that have a strong interest about how many registry schemas or how many register samples have been created. because this is going to be a readout on how much they are producing, for example, right? So if you want to see how much things are in motion within the company, assuming that from the moment a sample is registered is because that sample is for a long-term use, this means that you are having a good motion in place. But you could also say that there are departments that actually do not care that much about how many samples are registered, but rather about how many experiments have been not only concluded, but reviewed and approved. We know that this is always a sticky point. Everyone likes to be hands-on, pipettes here and there. That's the exciting part, right? It's like we love being at the bench and doing the experiments and seeing the results. And that's the most thrilling moment. When it comes to documenting, it's a bit less interesting. It's less exciting, but needs to be done. And it really needs to be done when whatever we are doing has an impact, not only in terms of regulations, but even for a go-to-market, right? We need to be clean from the beginning that we start an experiment till the end, and not only cleaning the bench, but closing things from a documentation perspective. So there might be a department that would say, we really need to make sure that we have full visibility on how many experiments have been created, how many experiments have been closed, how many experiments have been reviewed and approved. Because there might be a huge mismatch, and maybe if they would only monitor experiments coming in, looks wonderful, but when it comes to submit a patent or something, and you haven't had approval for those experiments, you're in trouble because you will have to do a retrospective measure and a retrospective action on all those numbers. So again, it very much depends on what is the main focus of interest of each of the departments. And I think that's the beauty of the system, that it really permits you to do whatever you want to do. And it doesn't need to be a super complicated dashboard. It might be who has created experiments this week. That's simple, right? Managers could benefit from this to say, okay, how my team is performing. This is another readout. So again, it's a very flexible system that at the end of the day, its usage, it's a result of everyone's creativity.
Is it fair to say that implementing a benchling solution, moving to digitalization, is also, as you were saying, helping the documenting part, so helping the documentation, the making sure the IPs are well documented, the moving further than when everything goes right, further to manufacturing and so on, you provide solid documents. So is your tool also facilitating this piece where R&D people are not really keen to do?
And that's absolutely yes. So another beauty of the system is that it has to be built as an interconnected framework. So it's not that we will be logging data as if we would be writing things in a notepad. If that is the purpose, then there's no point of using a database like this, right? You just keep with your notepad, that's it. The idea behind is that you will have a structured page in which everything that is registered there can have actually the link towards the source of truth. So for example, if you are creating an experiment, let's say you are doing, you are getting samples from a tissue that then you need to do a Western blot, and then you need to do the analysis, you will have a register of the sample, and this sample will directly, you can click on that and you will get directly redirected towards all the information, all the metadata that belongs to that sample. Same for where is the sample located. So you can put together the inventory location so that within one piece of paper on the screen, actually you get way more. It's not only the description of your experimental procedures, but it's the location, the nature, and even the results that go with it. So in one frame, you have everything centralized and with full traceability. And for me, this is one of the major plus that a platform of this kind offers, because again, how many times you have to navigate through folders within different computers, or like navigate through drawers within who knows how many fridges or freezers to locate things. Here, the idea is that you don't need to go physically to that place where you've done the thing, but you have everything centralized. Of course, it takes time to put things in a digitalized manner, but the time savings are massive. And of course, back to your question about does this help documentation and traceability for submission or you name it, definitely yes.
Very good. I think we are reaching the end. More comments are entering. Congratulations about the about this session. The last question is about if this session is recorded. Yes, the session is recorded, and you will be, as attendee, you will be receiving a recorded session in a matter of 1 or 2 days. Meritxell, it's been really a great pleasure to have you on board this afternoon. Very interesting. I think Benchling is doing a great job helping R&D labs in moving digital. I'm looking forward to know more about Benchling projects. Thank you very much, Meritxell.
Of course, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone that has joined the entire hour. I'm really glad that we made it together. And thank you, Isabel, for true collaboration. It's been a pleasure to work with.
Thank you. Looking forward. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.